Def Leppard's Pour Some Sugar on Me was one of the biggest songs of the 80s, but the track was nearly never recorded. It would only do so because of a happy accident. And the album it comes from, Hysteria, saw numerous delays and tragedies during its creation. It too was nearly never made. So what's the story behind this song and Hysteria? If you love delving into music history like I do, this is the place for you. Subscribe and join the pack. First, let's rewind to February 1984. Def Leppard had already achieved significant success, particularly in the United States. Originating from Sheffield, the band had built an impressive reputation, performing at major US venues and selling 6 million copies of their 1983 album, Pyromania. As they looked to begin their next chapter, they moved into a shared house in Dublin to continue their journey. Now, success had brought immense pressure, and their record label demanded that the next release surpass the last. But no one had an answer as to how to make that happen. At that point, they were terrified. They had no ideas to work with. Touring made it impossible to write, with all the shows, interviews, and appearances taking up their time. Plus, after spending 2 years on their previous album, they were creatively drained. And this was a crucial point in their career. Critics were ready to pounce on whatever they produced next. So the pressure was on. Luckily, they had producer Robert John Mutt Lange back in the mix, the mastermind behind their previous successes, High and Dry and Pyromania. Lange, often seen as the band's unofficial sixth member, was fully integrated into their creative processes and eager to co-write. "Many bands keep the producer at a distance," Lange once said, but Def Leppard welcomed me completely. In 2002, Def Leppard guitarist Phil Collen recalled how Mutt suggested creating a rock equivalent of Michael Jackson's Thriller, an album that could produce 7 singles, and they would pretty much eventually achieve that. The idea for the album was certainly Mutt's, and he pushed the band beyond what they thought they could be. So this marked the beginning of what was to become Hysteria. And the first song that they produced was Animal. This would set the tone for the rest of the album. When the band's management and record label heard Animal, they were confident that the album was on the right track. However, that optimism was premature. By August, with a batch of songs ready, the band headed to Hilversum, Holland, to start recording. There, they were hit with the first of many setbacks. Producer Mutt Lange, fresh off finishing the Cars' Heartbeat City, was too emotionally drained to begin work on Def Leppard's project and pulled out. Management tried to shake things up by bringing Jim Steinman on board as producer. Now, Jim Steinman had written and composed the tracks on Meat Loaf's Bat Out of Hell. Their logic was, since Bat Out of Hell was a legendary album and Hysteria was aiming for similar heights, Steinman should be able to deliver. But as Joe Elliott noted at the time, Steinman was more of a writer than a producer, and the collaboration struggled from the start. Now, the band's approach to making music was methodical, perfectionist, but Steinman preferred capturing raw, spontaneous performances rather than carefully crafting a mix. Steinman's work style also didn't align with the band's. They would arrive at the studio ready to work by late morning, but Steinman would show up mid-afternoon, offering vague direction like asking Colin to play something more oily, which left him confused. And after Steinman finished with Def Leppard on any given day, he'd simply go and start work on Bat Out of Hell too. The band tried to maintain focus, but Steinman's attention seemed elsewhere, and they felt they were paying him not to show up. The final straw was when Steinman requested that the carpet in the studio was changed because he didn't like the colour of it. With several tracks still incomplete, management realised the collaboration wasn't working. They ended up buying Steinman out of his contract at a significant cost, scrapping the work they'd done with him and starting over. So if you're keeping count, that's setback number 2. Setback number 3 was far more tragic. Lange suggested the band bring in Nigel Green, who had been the engineer on their last 2 albums. With Green on board, Def Leppard started to move in the direction of self-producing the record. Now, the year of 1984 had a load of challenges for Def Leppard, but what was to come at the end topped them all. On New Year's Eve, drummer Rick Allen was involved in a car accident in Yorkshire, resulting in the loss of his left arm. It was a devastating injury for anyone, but especially for a musician, a drummer at that. He began collaborating with Simmons, a company known for its electronic drums, to develop a custom kit that he could play using both feet and his remaining arm. Reflecting on this in 2004, Allen said, "The accident changed me completely. I underwent a spiritual transformation, but the adjustment period was tough. I had to adapt to my new body and reconcile with my new reality. While Def Leppard hunkered down in Wisseloord Studios in Holland, the band's days became a balancing act. In one room, Rick was learning how to become a drummer again with his new electronic kit, and in the other room, they were working on Hysteria. The breakthrough moment came around when Rick invited the rest of the band into his room. He then played over a Led Zeppelin track. It was at that moment that they realized Rick was back. It turned into such a positive experience, said Phil Collin. Rick was overcoming something catastrophic. It's an incredible story of someone triumphing over adversity. So they were out of the woods with Rick Allen, but something else popped its head up. As strange as it sounds, having great songs doesn't automatically guarantee a great album. Joe Elliott said, "We knew the songs were there, and we had a vision for how they should sound, but we couldn't make it happen. We kept trying to guess what Mutt would have done." Weeks of recording passed, with the band struggling to fill the gap left by producer Mutt Lange. In a stroke of luck, though, Mutt felt okay again and rejoined the band to produce this album. But in another blow, they had to scrap everything they had done previously. "Throwing away all that work, it's not something we could go through again," Elliott once said, but it was Mutt who pushed us to do it. The material wasn't bad, it was as good as Pyromania. But Mutt asked us, why just make Pyromania 2? That album was a leap forward from High and Dry. Now we need to take a leap from Pyromania. We were uncertain if we could do it, but in the end, we did. So, scrapping everything they had done, again, that's setback number 4. After scrapping 16 months of work, the band was ready to clean up the mess, start fresh, and deliver the album they'd been striving for. But the stakes were high. Pyromania had sold 6 million copies, and now Hysteria would need to sell 5 million just to cover its costs. So the pressure was truly on. The financial team were anxious as hell, but Def Leppard tried to shake off all the negativity and focus on making some great music. As the band approached the finish line with 11 tracks completed, Mutt Lange felt they still lacked a cohesive album. Something vital was still absent. Then, during a break, Joe Elliott picked up a guitar and started playing a few notes of a melody he'd been toying with. He was working on the vocals for Armageddon when they took a coffee break. During that time, he picked up a guitar from the corner of the room and began playing, catching the attention of Mutt. Mutt asked what he was playing. Elliott said that the chords were quite universal, so he thought he was playing a cover of the Kinks or the Stones or the Who. But as he continued to strum, the phrase "pour some sugar on me" came out of Joe Elliott's mouth. Mutt exclaimed it was one of the best hooks he had heard in years and insisted they needed to work on it. And bear in mind, at that moment, it was just Elliott and Mutt in the studio. The others had left for the weekend. Now, Elliott wasn't quite sure how the rest of the band would respond to the prospect of having to record another song. They were all exhausted by this point. Remember, they were 2.5 years into the creation of this album at that point. But Mutt really believed in this song and thought it would be a great addition to the album. So they cracked on, and everything came together pretty quickly. The entire process only took around 10 days. This was undoubtedly the quickest thing they accomplished on that record, and it evolved into possibly the most crucial song of their entire career. Now, once they had a basic melody for the verses, each band member went away with a micro cassette player and recorded their ideas for their parts of the song. They would then exchange tapes with each other and interpret melodies and so on and so forth. The band quickly fell into a rhythm and they were back in sync. Mutt was determined not to let this opportunity pass him by, and thank God he didn't. Mutt Lange then spent 5 months mixing Hysteria, dedicating much of the time to setting the right atmosphere. Just when it seemed things couldn't get more challenging for Def Leppard, Lange faced a setback of his own. He spent 3 weeks in the hospital due to a leg injury. So that's setback number 5, I believe. Finally, in early 1987, the album was complete, featuring 12 tracks instead of the typical 10, with many strong songs left behind. The band's future now depended on how many copies Hysteria would sell. And remember, their target to cover the costs of the album was 5 million. Animal was the first single released, marking Def Leppard's first UK hit, which was a promising sign. Initially though, Hysteria's sales struggled, plateauing around 5 million copies, which would have been a significant achievement for almost any other band. But then, something unexpected happened. Dancers at, let's call them gentlemen's clubs, started using Pour Some Sugar on Me as their backing track. Now, this grassroots buzz amplified, and soon MTV and radio stations had picked it up. to a point where the album was selling tens of thousands of copies every day. And it ultimately reached 16 million total sales. While Love Bites is officially recognised as Def Leppard's biggest hit due to its ascent to number 1 on Billboard's Hot 100 singles chart, Pour Some Sugar on Me arguably had the most significant impact on the overall success of the album. It was Pour Some Sugar on Me that really captured the public's attention, with radio stations and MTV embracing it wholeheartedly, leading to what felt like non-stop heavy rotation. They even released a different version of the music video in the USA to make it more MTV friendly. The UK music video features the band in a house falling down around them. The US version has Def Leppard concert footage added to it, and subtle enhancements were made to the audio of the music video as well. The sound of a lively concert crowd was woven throughout the performance, creating a constant buzz. The song's chorus was also enriched with a slight echo, amplifying the atmosphere of a packed arena. This all culminated in record shops struggling to keep Hysteria stocked. Millions of copies were sold during the single's peak. And so the importance of Pour Some Sugar on Me for Def Leppard can't be overstated. It allowed them to regain their foothold in pop culture. And I'm sure you'll agree, if there's any track that encapsulates Def Leppard, it's gotta be Pour Some Sugar on Me. So if it wasn't for Mutt pushing the band beyond their comfort zone, Hysteria and Pour Some Sugar on Me might never have made it into the world. Now, Mutt also worked on another album by AC/DC, Back in Black. That too has a really interesting and tragic story behind it. Click over here to watch that one next.